So the topics we will be covering are an overview of the budget structure. We recognize this is a little bit of a complex budget, so we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the budget structure. We're going to review the fiscal reporting workbook at length. We will review time and effort forms. Again, we're going to touch on allowable activities and time to be reported. That was reviewed in the welcome webinar, but we wanted to revisit some of that. We're going to go into supplemental invoices and state share documentation reports, and then we're going to wrap up with budget projections and budget revisions, fiscal desk reviews, and then we have ample time for questions. So we anticipate our set agenda here will be about an hour and 15 minutes or so. I recognize we booked you all for about 2 hours, so we have plenty of time for questions, and if we want to walk through any specific scenarios again, we absolutely can do that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Naomi Stamper, who is going to jump off with that budget structure overview.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. We are looking at a picture that most of you are likely familiar with. We are revisiting the total CFO budget, and just to kind of give that big picture of how this project is funded. So as a reminder, your total CFO budget is that full piece, that full pie, and within that you have the federal share portion and the state share portion. That federal share portion makes up 1/3 of the whole pie, 1/3 of your total CFO budget, and that state share portion takes up 2/3 of that total CFO budget. This also equates to your federal share being 50% of your state share. So we talk about it in those two different ways, so you will hear it both as that 1/3, 2/3 split, and also that the federal share is 50% of your state share. As a reminder, the state share is just capturing those existing resources that your campus or other non-federal sources are already paying for. So other funding that your campus or entity has. And we are then documenting the value of those efforts and reporting them. There's no exchange of money, it's just documenting those efforts. The federal share portion then is what your entity is being reimbursed. Now I'm going to show you this budget example. Once again, I think this is something that is familiar to most of you. This is showing your budget summary. So it's showing the different budget categories, as well as then the breakdown between the state share, the federal share, and the total program cost. So that final column is your total CFO budget, wrapping together the state share plus the federal share. In this example, you'll see that there's not an even 1/3, 2/3 split between that state share and that federal share, but overall those dollar amounts are represented to those 2/3 and 1/3. So you'll see that overall $100,000 represents the state share, the $50,000 represents the federal share, and then that whole total program cost, the $150,000, is your total CFO budget. We are now going to show you what this looks like within your budget workbook. And as a reminder, we will be sending out documents that we're talking about after this webinar. One of them will be your fiscal reporting workbook. I'm going to pull up the fiscal reporting workbook, and within that workbook is going to be your year one budget summary and your year one budget detail.
And Naomi, while you're pulling that up, I just wanted to mention that we are definitely monitoring the chat box throughout the webinar. So please feel free to shoot us questions anytime. And if you even wanted us to unmute your line, we're happy to do so to talk through any questions you have.
Absolutely. Here, this is what we're looking at right now is the first page in your fiscal reporting workbook. So this whole workbook is an example. So yours will look slightly different because your budget will be different. And so your invoice and state share documentation reports will look a little different. But as an example, the first page will be this budget summary. So what it's showing is the overall totals by budget category. So you'll see you have the different categories in that first column, and then the total dollar amounts within those categories for both state share and federal share and the total program cost. So once again, this goes back to that pie chart that has the 1/3 federal share, 2/3 state share for that total CFO budget. We only have year one in your fiscal reporting workbook because this project has an annual closeout. So as a reminder, the funds don't roll over year to year. So each year you'll be getting a new fiscal reporting workbook that has that year's budget in it. So previously when you've seen this, it's had the summaries for year one, and then below it was years 2 and 3. Right now we're just looking at year one because that's what we're going to be reporting on in this federal fiscal year. I just want to also point out this number to you right here. This is that number showing that 50% or less. That's what we can reimburse you with that federal share dollars. We can reimburse you up to 50% of those state share costs that are being reported. I'm going to move over now into the budget details to go through some examples and just point out a few things that we commonly see within these budgets. Scrolling up to the top, you will see the first category is personnel. This is what I'm going to spend the most time on reviewing, just because this is where there are a lot of different details that you'll see often. I see that we have a question, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. We'll get to you soon, Den. So up here are all of your personnel that are going to be listed within this section of your, within your budget. So I'm going to go through two of them that are listed in blue. You do have the link to this example budget, so if you want to pull it up later and look at the other calculations that are listed in here, just to kind of give you an example of how some of these other positions are calculated and how we're representing them, feel free to do so. You'll have the link to this in the PowerPoint that we'll be sending out later. I'm going to point out two, though, just so we can walk through a couple of examples. You'll notice that this workbook is set up to have annual salary and total FTE. So total FTE, the FTE represents the full-time equivalent. That means that if somebody is working 40 hours a week or 80 hours in a year, they're a full 1.0 FTE. They're working full-time. That's because 40 hours a week times 52 weeks in a year equals 2080 hours. And that'll be important especially if you're looking at people that aren't working full-time, because you still need to represent it in that same sort of manner within this workbook, because everybody has to be represented as a portion of an FTE. So for this first individual, we're looking at somebody who's salaried. So they are not paid by the hour. So you'll notice that in this annual salary cell, it's just a hard entered number. That's just the salary that they get for the year. This over here for their FTE is the portion of their time that they are working on CFO. So any efforts that they're contributing to CalFresh outreach are being captured in this FTE column. It's sometimes a little hard to figure out how you can kind of estimate that because it's a little bit abstract, but if you look at it in terms of the number of hours per week that they're putting in, it usually is a little bit easier to kind of gauge what level of effort that person is contributing to this project. So you can see in this FTE cell here, we're estimating for this individual in this example that she's going to be contributing about 2 hours a week, which is this 2, over the course of the full year, so times the 52 weeks in a year, out of those 2080 hours. And so then what you get there is a representation of the FTE that this individual is contributing to this project. Over in these two columns, you'll notice that then we have that funding split out between state share and federal share. You can have it split out. This individual right now is listed just for state share, but keep in mind that your budget can be structured in many different ways. So you could have every single position that's listed in here split exactly with those 2/3 state share, 1/3 federal share. And so every line in this could be split between both of these. Or you can have them split out however you need them to be based on how these positions are funded by your entity. Overall, what we're looking for though is just in the overall, your total CFO budget, that this percent here remains at 50% or less. So overall, these totals here, regardless of how the split is between each category, as long as this is 50% or less, it's not a problem. We find that oftentimes personnel is going to be more heavy in state share, and the other categories might be a little more heavy in federal share. But that doesn't have to be the way it is. That's just what we see often. But if every line is split 1/3, 2/3, that's fine also. So I just want to show you then this one other example in this personnel section to show you how we would be representing somebody who is not salaried employee. So right now we're looking at a student assistant line, but this could be anybody that's a part-time employee that's paid by the hour. And so we still have to represent them though with an annual salary and a total FTE, even though that might not be how they look on their HR paperwork. So for these individuals, we're looking at calculating out an annual salary based on their hourly rate and those total hours in a year. So here we're saying these individuals are making $13 an hour times 2080 hours in a year to get that annual salary amount. In the FTE column, you'll see then that we're calculating their FTE out based on the fact that we're anticipating 2 individuals. So we have 2 people here. We're estimating that they're going to be working 12 hours a week over the course of the year. So 52 weeks in the year. We're then dividing that by that 2080 hours in order to get the FTE equivalent of those hours. You'll notice here that in this example, this position is all paid for by federal share. Once again, though, that's just an example. These can be split however works best for your entity. I also then want to point out off to the side here that we have added in this fringe benefit calculator. You don't need to use this, but we find that it's very helpful because if you scroll down to the next category, which is fringe benefits, the totals are just all lumped together. And for a lot of entities, there's a different fringe rate for every person. And so what this allows you to do off to the side is to enter in that rate for each individual to calculate out those amounts line by line so that they can then bundle up down here into the fringe benefit category. Before I move on to those other categories though, I just want to point out one more thing because it's new this year. So if you are reporting time for unpaid interns or volunteers, we're going to go into some of those. There's a few more reporting requirements for those positions, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I just want to point out that in the workbook here, for the budget, we have a similar calculation to these student assistants. It's going to be the minimum wage for whatever county you're in California times that 2080 hours. And then again, the FTE is just calculated based on the number of hours per year you anticipating them working. In this example, it's 16 hours per week times 17 weeks per semester, because we're looking at student interns specifically on a semester campus, times 2 semesters per year. And off to the side here, you'll also see that there's a 0% fringe benefit rate for these individuals because we can't capture fringe benefit rates for interns. So you can capture the hourly rate for them, but not the fringe benefits that would be associated with a person that was actually getting paid by your entity. So that's the main part of this workbook that I wanted to talk about. Briefly, I'm just going to go back through the other categories just to remind you of some of the other sections. So here, these are just the position descriptions that align with all those positions that were in that top portion of the budget. Again, here's the fringe benefit category. Notice that it's just the total state share and total federal share based off of these percents. And so sometimes that's not always straightforward if you're doing it person by person. So that's why we have that calculator up there. We then have operating expenses down here. These are some of the common things that we see in operating expenses. By no means is this completely inclusive. And if you have other things in your budget, that's fine. If you have questions about what you might need there and what would be allowable, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to answer questions about that and talk through different scenarios with you. Again, you'll see that these splits are different. It doesn't have to be this way. It can be split however you want, whatever works best for you. We have the travel section down here. During the proposal development phase, we did encourage everybody to include this CalFresh forum. So I think most of you have that in your budget, as well as some other local mileage to do some other shorter travel. And then we have other costs. which most of you do have in your budget. And so you'll see there's program materials, promotional materials such as tables and signs, things like that. Again, if you have questions about what would be allowable or not, feel free to reach out to us. We do have a list of some examples, but by no means is this inclusive. And if there are other things that would work well for your campus that you think you want, just let us know and we can work with you on that. And then down here, you have the total direct cost, which is just the total of all those other categories. And then the indirect rate for your total CFO budget down here at the bottom. So that gives you a brief overview again of the budget. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint really quickly and just give you a few more reminders. So again, this is a 3-year contract, so your budget is for 3 years. We were only looking at 1 year because there is that annual closeout. We did send your final 3-year budget to your campus during the summer. If for some reason you don't have a copy of that and need it, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. Your contract just has a very summarized version of your budget. So if you need that full workbook that has all of the details for your 3-year budget, we do have that on hand and can get it to you if you don't have it. Also, as a reminder, I just want to recap those last few things I said because I'm actually not sure where we got cut off. So really briefly, I think you heard me say that we can send you your 3-year budget if you need it, and that we have linked to that previous proposal webinar that we did back in April if you need some more examples of calculating out FTEs and effort contributed to this project. So thank you for your patience, everybody. And now we're just scrolling up to find that last question really quick. I believe it had to do with the contract.
It looks like our chat box refreshed when that internet lapse happened. So the question was along the lines of requesting an update regarding the contract. So just to reiterate, the contract is still moving through CDSS. Unfortunately, it is not executed yet, but we have been in regular communication with them, and we will send out an update in writing with all of you today by the end of the day. But we have many people advocating on our behalf and really pushing to get that through the process. So we're feeling really supported at this point. It's just a matter of time. So we're hoping for it to come through today or any moment.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the budget that's in your fiscal reporting workbook, I am going to turn it over to Kathleen Johnson, and she is going to talk about fiscal reporting.
Good morning, everybody. So let's get into fiscal reporting. What is fiscal reporting? This is going to be the submission of your invoice, your state share documentation report, and any personnel backup. So this is going to be in the form of time and effort forms, which we will go over a little bit later. So your invoice is reporting all your federal share costs. These are the costs that are going to be reimbursed back to your campus with these subcontracted funds. Your state share documentation report, or SSDR for short, is reporting the value of all those CFO allowable costs that are funded by your campus or other federal funds. No money is being exchanged for your state, anything reported on your state share documentation report. This is just capturing the value of these efforts. So we're going to take a look at an example. We're going to pull up that fiscal reporting workbook again and actually look at the invoice and state share documentation report. So this fiscal reporting workbook has your budget summary and the detail that Naomi went over, and it also has the fiscal reporting checklist. This checklist we developed, and this is what we look at when we're going over any invoice or state share documentation report that you guys submit to us for review. So we thought this would be a handy tool for you guys to have as you're developing these documents. So here you will see your Q1 state share entry page. This is where you're going to enter in all the expenses that you're reporting as state share for Q1. So right here is personnel. So you'll see that you have your position title and the name of the person. So right here we have an example of Jane Smith, and she's reporting 10 hours of state share for Q1. Her hourly pay rate is $51. These are things that you're going to enter in, and this amount right here, your program salary cost, will auto-populate based on the amount of hours and your hourly pay rate you put here. And then you enter in your fringe benefits for each person. So Jane Smith has a fringe benefit rate of 43.5%. So if you take the program salary cost of $510 and times it by this fringe benefit rate, you will get this program fringe benefit cost, and that will also auto-populate. So you do this for everybody that is reporting time for state share for Q1. So you'll list them all right here, all their hours, all their hourly pay rate, and then the salary cost and the fringe benefit cost will total down here. Then for any other costs, you just hard enter amount. So if you're claiming any operating costs of state share, travel expenses, or other costs, you just hard enter them right here in these grayed out cells. And these are all going to auto-populate onto your state share documentation report. This is the report that you will send us a signed version of, and we will keep this on file and track your state share throughout the year. So as you see here, you'll have your campus name and your campus address. This will have your sub-contract number. This will be the state share period that this is Q1. So this is 10/1/18 through 12/31/18. And right here, you'll see that the actual expenses of this period column calculates all of the costs that you had entered onto your entry page. So you'll see the salary cost is $510, the fringe benefit rate here, and then your indirect cost will automatically calculate based on your indirect cost rate for your campus or your entity type. And then you'll have the total right here, and this is the total state share that you're reporting this quarter. So down here you'll see this percentage, and it should be greater than or equal to 66.67% for state share. So this goes back to that pie, that 1/3, 2/3 pie. This is the 2/3 that we're talking about. Then you have a separate, for campuses, you have a separate entry page for federal share costs. For our other entities, you'll have the one entry page, and that'll automatically split 1/3, 2/3 between your invoice and your state share reporting document. So for campuses, you have a separate entry page for federal share. This is where you're going to enter in anybody who's claiming federal share hours, and these costs are going to be reimbursed back to your campus. So this example, we have John Doe reporting 10 hours, and his hourly rate And again, it does the same thing. The program salary costs and the program fringe benefit costs will auto-populate. Everybody you list will then total down here. And then you hard enter any federal share operating costs, travel expenses, or other costs into these gray cells. This will then auto-populate onto your invoice, up here titled invoice. And it has the same information. It'll have your campus name, your address, your contract number, the period of the quarter, and then here's your actual expenses this period. So this total right here, the $198.20, that would be the amount going back to your campus. We also need a signed version of this document as well.
And this is Naomi. I just want to chime in really quick, and I just want to point out that this example that we're showing you right now just has one individual listed for both state share and federal share. So we recognize that that is probably not what your invoices will usually look like. You'll usually have more people listed, and generally in a quarter, we'd probably see about 25% of your total budget being reported. But for this example, we were just trying to show you how you would enter somebody in there. We wouldn't expect you to be at 0.59% for any quarter.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Naomi. And then also on this invoice, I just want to point out a few other things. So this column right here has your approved federal share budget. This column pulls from that summary budget tab, and this is all your approved budget for federal share. And then this column right here is your cumulative expenses to date. So right now it matches your actual expenses this period because this is quarter one. But quarter two, quarter three, quarter four, this will start increasing, and it automatically calculates all of the expenses to date for that quarter. And then right here, you'll have your unexpended balance. This just takes your approved budget amount, minuses your cumulative expenses to date, and then you have what's left for your remaining quarters. So now I'll pop back to the PowerPoint. Oh.
Sorry, we just had a few things in our way from Zoom. Here we go.
There we go. Okay, so just a couple fiscal reporting requirements reminders. So these reports are due to your fiscal analyst 30 days after the end of each quarter, and we're going to provide a link to a website where you will submit these documents. We're hoping to have these linked to you early January. And then you can reimburse up to 50% of your cumulative state share that you've reported. There could be no negative balances on your federal share invoice. You can over-report state share, but you cannot over-report federal share. We highly recommend that you send a draft of your fiscal reporting documents to your fiscal analyst for review prior to obtaining signatures. This will help just give that little feedback and make sure it's nice and polished up before getting everybody's signatures. Once you submit these documents to your fiscal analyst, the invoice review process will be completed within 5 business days, and we will, if we have any corrections or feedback that are requested, please resubmit those corrected docs within 5 business days of that request. And just again, your workbook will only be for 1 year. These funds do not roll over year to year, and at the beginning of each year, you will start with a new annual budget and a new fiscal reporting workbook. Now I'm going to turn it over to Amy Reason, and she's going to dive deeper into time and effort forms.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathleen. I hope you all are having fun so far looking at all these spreadsheets. I know we are. Okay, so we have a question to answer.
And the question is, how can I be added to the email distribution list? So as a reminder, we use your contractor information forms to generate our email distribution list. So if you're not getting emails from us, it's likely because you're not on your campus's contractor information form. So please feel free to reach out to us if you need to be added to that, and we can send you your current contractor information form, and then if you can add whoever is needed to that and send it back to us, we will get you added to our distribution list as soon as possible.
Terrific. Thank you, Naomi. And we're continuing to monitor that chat box, so keep the questions rolling in. It's great. So we are going to now talk about time and effort forms. So as Naomi and Kathleen had mentioned, when you submit your quarterly fiscal reports to us, the one piece of backup documentation that is required for every quarter is called the time and effort form. This is what is used to document time, allowable time on CalFresh outreach activities, and it should be verifiable with your accounting or payroll system. These are actual hours, and the time is to be reported in hours, not percentage of time. And these are due, like I said, every quarter with your fiscal reporting documentation. Other backup documentation for other types of costs, such as travel, maybe it's mileage reimbursement, or other costs, other materials that you purchase, that you're going to want to retain in-house again. So we're only talking about backup for personnel time. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example. So we have two templates. We have one that's developed by Department of Social Services. We also have one that is developed by the California Association of Food Banks. I'm going to review an example that is on that CAFB, California Association of Food Banks template, just because it's a more streamlined example. And so, oh, shucks, let's see. Let me go. How do I get there when this is popping up? There we go. Thank you, team. So, sorry, we have a lot of documents open on here, as you can imagine. So this is the streamlined version that was developed by CAFB, and it allows you to report your time for the full quarter, so all 3 months, all on one page. The difference with the other one, I will show you in a moment, has multiple pages that then summarize in a separate sheet. So this layout here, I'm going to start at the top left. So we have a spot for name, organization name, and then date range of the quarter being reported. And then you're going to see here where the hours go. It's going by week. So this is representing week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, optional week 5 of the month. We have listed up above how many business days are in the month. And then you're going to report down here the hours worked on allowable CalFresh outreach activities or any paid time off. Now I'm going to note here how it says total for the day. So if you work full time and you take a day off and have a full 8 hours of paid time off, you're going to put the full 8 hours, because what this workbook is going to do is automatically prorate it for you in that next row right below here, row 16. Okay, so your hours worked are going to be hours specifically on CalFresh. Your paid time off will be total. Then you would note a V, S, or H for the type of paid time off that you would be claiming if you do claim any paid time off. And then this will auto-populate the total hours down here in yellow. So in this example, we're showing that in week 1, this individual worked 1 hour on CalFresh. In week 4, they also had another hour. So you can see here that it is totaling up the hours as we go across. Okay, so then over here, the number we would be looking at is your quarter total. That quarter total will then match what you're going to be putting in your fiscal reporting workbook. So if this individual is reporting state share only, we would expect to see those 10 total hours reported in that entry page. If they're reporting federal share or only, we would expect to see it in the federal share entry page. Let's say that they're split. Let's say that they do both. You have two options here. You can do either one time and effort that is state share only and another time and effort form that's federal share only, and then the combination of both would be their total. Or you can just use one time and effort and then just note on there what portion is applied to state share and what portion is applied to federal share. As long as it's noted and communicated to us, we can then verify that against how you enter that in the fiscal reporting page, and then we can proceed with that review. Kathleen has something to add here?
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that although the time and effort forms have to be reported in quarter-hour increments, you can report actual hours on the on the invoice summary pages, and you just have to make a note to the side that the time and effort form is rounded to the nearest quarter hour.
Right, right. So we see this issue come up a lot with folks who are salaried. We don't report time in hourly increments. It's typically in percent. So we have to do that translation. So what Kathleen was giving an example of, let's say this individual, according to your accounting system, it really was 9.89 hours that really was paid out. You're going to round it to the nearest quarter hour. So on here would be 10. But then in your entry page of that invoice workbook, I'm going to click back over here. Sorry for going back and forth, but here, let's say we're in that entry page. Instead of the 10 hours, you can, of course, put that 9.89 there so it calculates accurately. And what we're going to ask that you do is make a note right over here off to the side that says TEF is rounded to the nearest quarter hour. So that just tells us why there's a slight difference. That was a great addition. Okay, so I'm going to click back over to that time and effort form here. The other key pieces to note are that these are required to be signed. So they have to be signed by the individual as well as their one-up or supervisor, and then dated. Keep in mind that the date should be after the date of the last time being reported. So if you start to pre-fill and pre-date, we're going to notice that, and we're going to ask you to please sign and date and confirm all hours. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and now click over to our other template. This is the other template, very similar content. However, you're going to see down here, we have 4 worksheets in this workbook, and the reason is that each worksheet represents 1 month, so you're reporting hours by day as opposed to week. Same categories, hours worked, paid time off, and specifying that paid time off. This is going to be the same for each month. So this is month 1, month 2, month 3, and then there is a cumulative page where you can see here it's going to do the same thing, the prorating of your paid time off. It will give you your total billable hours and whatnot. Same concept, it's just this one is going to be reported by day, and individual months are split out. The other template, again, it's reported by week, and all 3 months are bundled up onto 1 page. All right. These are wonderful time and effort forms. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and just recap a couple of notes. So I mentioned those 2 templates. The time is reported in the quarter hour. The of all time and effort forms is that we have these, let's see, what is it, 4 or 5 pieces. The quarter being reported, so it has to identify the quarter being reported, has to identify the employee's name. It needs to, of course, show the hours spent on CFO, and it must have both the employee and supervisor signature. These 2 templates are already reviewed and approved by CDSS to use right away. Of course, we will send you these templates right away. If you would like to propose an alternative format, if you have something that your entity is already using that you would like to use in place of these provided templates, we're asking that you send those to your fiscal analyst by the end of this month so we can batch those and get them approved moving forward. All right, so I'm going to jump over to time and effort forms for unpaid interns or volunteers. So as Naomi mentioned when reviewing the budget, we are able now to capture unpaid intern or volunteer time as state share. And they also need to submit a time and effort form just like all other personnel. The difference is that we don't have, of course, payroll to back up those hours like we would for a paid individual. So what CDSS has asked us to do is require another form of backup documentation, and you have 2 options. We can do either the activity log or the duty statement. The difference is the activity log is used for an intern or volunteer who might be doing multiple activities. They're not solely contributing to CalFresh activities. A duty statement would be used for anyone whose role is 100% CalFresh allowable activities. So we see that, for instance, on our own campus, when we bring on interns who are purely placed only with the CalFresh Outreach program, they then do a duty statement as opposed to the log. One thing I want to back up and mention here, in order for this time to be captured as state share, it must be part of an ongoing structured program. So for instance, if you have a one-time volunteer who comes to help with, let's say, just your CalFresh Outreach Day. They come and they help with setups, they're helping doing promotion, breakdown, but then they go along their merry way and they do not work on CFO activities again. We are not able to capture that time. We are only able to capture the time for individuals who are trained and continuing to be contributing toward the deliverables of the CalFresh Outreach contract. If you have questions about that, of distinguishing, would this be capturable or not, that is something that you could absolutely work through with your fiscal analyst. So let's go ahead and look at the activity log template. Thanks, Naomi. Naomi's going to click to that for me.
We didn't open up the activity log.
Okay.
Would you like me to pull it up?
Yes. So that's going to take just a moment to open up that hyperlink. I apologize. That was.
We will get that hyperlink fixed before we send this out and get it to you. We can briefly kind of just tell you the format though. It's an Excel workbook, and the first page has a summary of all the weeks for that quarter, and then each week has a separate worksheet in the workbook that just asks for a description of the activities that were done on various days and the hours that are being contributed on those days, and then that bundles up into the overall summary worksheet at the beginning of the workbook.
Right, and so what that allows us to do is two things. Again, remember, these are used for folks who aren't doing 100% CalFresh outreach, so it allows us to decipher which of their activities are CalFresh allowable. And then two, it gives a little bit of dialogue around what are those hours, what are they doing to contribute to the deliverables. So as Naomi said, there's a brief description spot for when they log their hours of what types of activities they're doing. We even provide a drop-down list for you to be able to choose from to try and keep it streamlined, and then people can customize from there. So it looks like we have a question to answer.
And the question was, what is the benefit of capturing unpaid state or staff time? And Chantal, thank you for chiming in and answering. And I just want to add to that yes, the benefit of that is that can then contribute to your state share, the state share portion of your budget, so that then it helps so that you can get your full federal share reimbursement back to your entity.
Right. Right. So this is, yes, so unpaid time is capturable state share, which allows you to increase your overall budget. So the more state share you're able to capture, the more federal share you're able to claim and get reimbursed for. Thank you, Naomi. You were able to pull up the duty statement. So this, again, is the template that you would use for folks who are 100% CalFresh activities. We've highlighted many sections in here because this is customizable. So if this works for your entity or doesn't, you would want to, tweak where needed. But essentially, this document is to give a description of what the individual is doing and how they are contributing to CalFresh outreach. Please scroll down, Naomi. And then they give a breakdown of how their percent of time is split between a set list of activities, and then they sign and date this, and this would be kept on file as backup for any time reported as state share for that unpaid volunteer or intern. All right, so we've been talking a lot about time and capturing time and that time and effort, and the reason we spend so much time with this is because we typically see that the majority of CalFresh outreach budgets, of course, are for personnel time. What we're doing is application assistance. And so what is allowable time to be reported? Any time that you're thinking, talking, or doing anything related to CalFresh outreach allowable activities, that can be counted. So things like webinars, phone calls and communication, training, doing your outreach plan activities, facilitating your drop-in assist days or your CalFresh outreach days. All of those things can be captured. So what we're going to refer to again is the USDA guidance, which starts on page 16. This is a hyperlink that you will have when we send the slides out if you don't already have access to this document. Again, this is the guidance on the funding stream that is delivered from the federal government to the states. And so the language in the guidance is geared towards states and more community-based outreach. So depending on your entity type and how you serve the low-income population, you may need to translate it to fit for your organization. But I want to show a few examples again on the next slide of CalFresh outreach activities. I see that we have a question. I know we can state, let's see, state share the food bank portion, but I can state share federal share once a week. Okay, federal share once a week activity, which will be vegetable, fruit stand. Okay, Ben, I'm wondering if you can add just maybe a little more of an explanation to that to help me answer that question in just a moment. I'm going to keep going on the guidance, and Ben, go ahead and give us just a little more detail, and I will get back to you. So this is the beginning of the table that starts on page 16 of the guidance. Of course, there's much more than this, but these are some key areas of allowability. And really, it's just highlighting what are we doing to meet the deliverables of CalFresh outreach. Of course, the goal is to do pre-screens, to do application assistance, to help low-income individuals through that 30-day process with the county, to be a liaison between the county and applicants and help troubleshoot any questions or concerns. So all of the activities required to that end would be allowable. So pre-screening, application assistance, doing outreach activities, doing your CalFresh days, so on and so forth, all of that would be capturable. So on those time and effort forms, you want to make sure that you're capturing all of the communication and planning and coordination that goes along with completing those activities. Next, we're going to talk about supplementals. So supplemental invoices and state share documentation reports. So Kathleen described the process for fiscal reporting. Again, fiscal reporting is due 30 days after the quarter ends. We report by quarter. Let's say you report quarter one, and then you're going and you're reporting quarter two, and you're later on in the year and you realize, oh my goodness, I failed to report something that was way back in quarter one. This is your mechanism to be able to do that. You're able to go back to previous quarters and do corrections or even augment what you've already reported. The difference between a supplemental and doing an invoice correction is when we receive your invoice, we're going to do our initial review. We might provide feedback to have a correction. Kathleen covered that 5-day window that we are hoping to receive corrections. Let's say then we finalize it and we say, okay, we're sending it to process for payment. At that point, the correction period is done. You get paid. We move on to the next quarter. Those are in invoice or state share documentation report corrections. Once it goes to get paid, that quarter essentially is closed out and done. So if we need to go back and do a correction after that point, that is when it's considered a supplemental. So we're going to go ahead and show you an example of a supplemental invoice or state share documentation report. So we're going back to that same fiscal reporting workbook. We are going to go over, so we have our quarter one pages, we have our quarter two pages, and then where you're going to see in here, we've inserted a supplemental. There it is, quarter two supplemental state share entry page. So what that tells me is previously Jane Smith had reported in quarter two 10 hours, and now we're seeing Jane Smith for 20 hours for a combined total of 30 hours. So what this is adding to the hours that were already submitted. So that tells us that the correct amount of hours should have been 30. Oops, I missed reporting 20 of those hours. I want to go back and add that to my state share documentation report. So again, in your supplemental, you are adding to or correcting what's already been reported. You are not repeating what's already been reported. All right. Let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. And I just want to reiterate that if you need to do a supplemental, you're going to want to reach out to your fiscal analyst, and we will insert those supplemental worksheets into your workbook wherever we are in the timeline. So those need to flow not necessarily chronologically, but cumulatively. So we are going to insert them at the point to which we have already invoiced to date. Also, you can submit a supplemental up to one for each year, or I'm sorry, one for each quarter, and they can be submitted at any time throughout the federal fiscal year up to the point when we are closing out the federal fiscal year at Q4. So what that means is we may already be in next October closing out Q4, and at the time when you send your Q4 fiscal report, you can also submit supplementals all the way back to Q1, so long as there's no more than one per quarter. Okay, so we have a question we're going to go ahead and answer before we go into budget revisions. Promoting CalFresh and Food Bake. We can register time that's used. One way of promoting was having a once-a-week fruit and veggie stand as a promotion tool. Can you scroll up to the previous portion? I'm wondering if the question is about, allowable cost.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is the question that you're trying to ask, Ben, is that are you promoting CalFresh at some food distribution events, and you're saying that you're using a fruit and veggie stand as a way to kind of pull people in order to promote CalFresh outreach?
Correct. Okay.
So if you are spending any time promoting CalFresh outreach, that time can absolutely be captured. It can be captured as state share or federal share, no matter where you are. So if you're doing an event out in the community or on your campus, if you are promoting CalFresh outreach, that time can absolutely be captured.
Right. Now, the one thing I will add to that is if you are doing CalFresh outreach in combination with another activity, you may want to look at prorating your time. So maybe it's 50-50. So if your time doing that activity is 2 days, maybe one day you say, half of it is CalFresh outreach relatable and the other half is food pantry relatable. So you might want to even consider, prorating the time. You also want to consider that when it comes to costs other than time as well.
And then there's one more question we have before we move into budget projections and bars. Can we use efforts expenditures from our Chancellor's Office funded grant for the Hunger-Free Campus as part of the state share portion? And absolutely, that is a great source of state share. So those are all state dollars. So if your campus is using those funds, those are also known as SB 85 funds. So both the community college and the CSUs and the UCs got some of those SB 85 funds. If your campus is using those funds to conduct CalFresh outreach allowable activities, then absolutely that is a wonderful source of state share.
And the name state share is a little bit misleading. We should call it non-federal share. I mean, really, you can capture state share on any funds that are non-federally sourced. So that goes for our community-based organizations as well. Any other funds that you're receiving from the state or community-based can be captured as state share. Kathleen, you have something to add?
Yeah, and if you're capturing those funds as state share, just make sure they're CFO allowable costs and activities. So if those funds are going towards purchasing food for events or anything like that, that can't be counted as state share. But if it's personnel time, promoting CFO, any CFO allowable activities, then you can capture it as state share.
Right. So she just mentioned one of our allowables, one of our unallowables, again, on this contract is food. So food is not able to be claimed as federal share or as state share with this contract. These are all great questions. Keep them rolling in. Okay, so what is a BAR? A BAR stands for a budget adjustment request, or you might hear us refer to it as just a budget revision. And that's used to update your budget. it is required to move money between categories, but not necessarily line items. For example, if you want to move money from personnel to travel, you will need to do a bar. If you need to move money from Jane Doe to John Smith, all within personnel, which is one category, you do not need to do a bar. You can complete an unlimited number of budget revisions throughout the course of the contract. We are here to help support you to implement the best CalFresh outreach program possible. So however you need to move your money around to accomplish that, we will help facilitate it. The key with bars is that we can have no change to the total budget amount by year. If we wanted to change the total budget amount, that would trigger a contract amendment, which is an entirely different process. Of course, if you would like to request either an increase or a decrease in your budget amount, you can absolutely propose that to your fiscal analyst, but that is a separate process. Naomi, you have something to add?
Yes, and I just wanted to add that most budget changes we are able to approve in-house here at the Center for Healthy Communities. There are a couple of items that require CDSS approval, so if you are looking to add those items into your budget, the process takes a little bit longer. So in those instances, it can't necessarily be a last-minute addition to your budget. Some of those are things like laptops, large purchases, adding any conference travel or out-of-state travel especially. So if you don't mind clicking on the bar instructions, I'm going to run through that, and I believe the list for those items, I am so sorry, the hyperlinks to these documents doesn't seem to be working on this computer that we're on. I'm wondering if you might take a moment to pull that up, just because there's a lot of information in those instructions. Give us just a moment. We're going to go ahead and pull that up. You're going to see we have a lot of folders. Yes. Way to go, Naomi. You found it. Okay, so here we go. So budget adjustment request. This we will, of course, like I said, update that hyperlink and include this for you all. But it gives you an idea of what you would be doing. If you're changing your budget, it needs to be marked. So any additions are bold, underlined, and in red font. Any removals are strike through red font, and any changes are just bold red font. This is from CDSS. That is why it's outlined this way. And then in subsequent bars, so if you complete one bar and it's approved and then you want to do another bar, we're just going to change the color. And so that way we can keep track of what's been changed throughout the revision process. And if any of you end up with a rainbow in your budget at the end of the year, that is fun too. Great. Okay, so then down below, you're going to see, note the following modifications to budget require USDA approval and apply to both prime and subcontractors. So any requests for equipment totaling over $5,000, any revision in the scope of work that would impact the overall quality of the program delivery, requests for theft-sensitive items such as computers, cameras, etc. So those are not in the equipment category because they don't meet that minimum of $5,000 threshold to qualify as equipment, but they do consider them theft-sensitive items, or sometimes you'll see them referred to as like computing devices. Anything in that category would require USDA approval. And then any requests for the out-of-state travel or attendance at conferences also do. Otherwise, like Naomi was saying, when we do budget revisions, we are happy to do it with you, and then the review process internally is usually really quick. If you are planning to submit a budget revision before your Q1 reporting deadline, we're asking for those to be submitted to us by mid-December, if at all feasible. Just with the holidays and everything, we want to have time to review and get back to you before Q1 invoicing is due. And the reason you might want to do that before your Q1 reporting deadline is if you already anticipate you're going to exceed your budgeted amount in any category.
Again, Kathleen said you can't have any negative balances on your federal share invoice. So if you anticipate you might already be exceeding an amount budgeted, definitely reach out to us right away. Okay, so I'm sorry, can we go back to that last one? Can I use my fiscal reporting workbook for projections to help facilitate this budget revision process? Absolutely. I'm just going to show you really quickly. Kathleen mentioned that there's cumulatives included in your state share documentation report and your invoice for each quarter. And so if you're projecting out for your out quarters using your entry pages, you can look at those state share documentation report pages or your invoice pages and see where your cumulative is falling. So let me go ahead and just pull that up, and I can play with some numbers with you real quick. This is a good time to go ahead and take any questions as well. So if you have any burning questions, go ahead.
It looks like there is one question, so while Amy is pulling that up, I will go ahead and answer it. Do we need to submit a budget for the state share portion? So your entity, we already have your budget for both your state share and federal share. So during that proposal submission phase, we have your state share budget and your federal share budget that roll up together for your total CFO budget. For the federal share portion, if you are exceeding any categories, that will absolutely require a budget revision. For state share, you can report negatives in state share. So if you're going over in a category on your state share documentation report, it doesn't necessarily require a budget revision.
Right, right. Yes, so just to show that again, your state share budget is shown side by side with your federal share. So yes, that's already been developed and submitted. Okay, so for this example, I'm gonna look at other costs. There's $2,000 budgeted in federal share. Let's say in Q1 for your federal share entry page, this is how you can use this to do some projections if it's helpful. Other costs are reported down here. So let's say, you know, oh gosh, Q1, I already have $800 that I'm going to be reporting. And then you can see down on your invoice, there's your $800. So your new remaining balance is $1,200. Now, when you go to Q2 on your invoice, let's say I'm going to be reporting again another $800. And then you go to your Q2 invoice. Okay, now my cumulative total to date is 800 plus 800, it's 1,600. My new unexpended balance is 400. Now you're going to Q3, and let's say you realize, oh gosh, for other costs, I have another $800 to report again. And now that's going to give me a negative balance. Oh, I got to keep scrolling over a little bit further. Q3 entry page, there we are. Okay. Let's say we have another $800 there, and then you're going to see on the Q3 invoice page that you're now going to have a negative balance. So this is how, if that's helpful at all, if that's a helpful tool to use, feel free to use this invoice workbook to project out quarters and see where your balance is going to end up. Naomi has something to add here.
Another tip that we've found helpful with some people is that for personnel is sometimes a really hard one to project out.
Yes.
But oftentimes, since we're looking at it by quarter, if you can anticipate that Q2 might be very similar to Q1, what's usually really helpful is to almost just take whatever were those actual amounts reported in Q1 and replicate those and plop them into Q2, 3, and 4 to see where you probably will land overall in personnel. If you think that Q1 is kind of representative of the whole year.
Right.
If you're on a campus, it might be a little different because during the semester system, the quarters don't align nicely with the semesters, but you can still look at what might be a representative quarter and use that to project out personnel because it gets a little trickier.
Yeah, usually in Q1 and 3, they tend to be a little more similar because they're part of a semester. Q2 is usually mostly all during a semester or a quarter when a campus would be in session. So that's a really good point. You might need to play with those projections. Kathleen?
And I just want to add here that we are here to assist you. So if you need help projecting out any of these costs, please just let us know, and we would be happy to help work that through with you.
It is very typical of us to do a budget revision with folks on Zoom where we're all looking at the same screen together and sit there and play with numbers and projections and talk through, wow, what is the scenario for your organization? Where are you going to be doing CalFresh outreach? Who are the people involved? And really working through that. We recognize when you developed your budget way back in spring, it may not be representative of where we're at now here in November. And so we are happy to walk through that with you and in fact complete most of your bar right alongside of you. Naomi has something to add.
It looks like there's one more question before we jump into the next section. Does our business services put CFO accounts under federal budget account numbers or state? I would assume federal since the money is coming from USDA. So I think I understand your question, but feel free to ask more if I don't quite hit it on the nail. So yes, you are correct that that federal share portion that is being reimbursed back to your campus is coming from the federal government. So it is pass-through funding that goes from USDA through CBSS to your campus. So if your campus has different accounting numbers for federal dollars versus state dollars, then yes, those would be considered federal dollars.
Yes, that is how our campus does it as well. It's assigned an account with for federal dollars. The next question.
Is there a list of paperwork due each month or quarterly? There are so many different tabs. Yes, there are.
Yes.
So keep in mind that this fiscal reporting workbook is for the whole year. Fiscal reporting happens every quarter, so on the federal fiscal year. So quarter one will encompass October through December of 2018, and that will be due then at the end of January 2019. So what you will need to turn in for that first quarter is the pages, the entry pages for quarter one, the SSDR for quarter one, and the invoice for quarter one, as well as those time and effort forms that we went over for any personnel that are reporting hours in either the state share or the federal share. The other tabs are for subsequent quarters. So you have all 4 quarters within this one workbook. And the reason we do that is so that you can easily see those cumulatives throughout the whole year. So they're all linked to each other. So once you enter quarter one, it'll automatically populate those cumulatives into your quarter two.
Ooh, another great question just came in. Do you have a sample of the bar form? So what you're going to do your budget revision on is your actual budget workbook. So we have instructions we will give you, and then what we would be doing is going back to your detailed budget and doing the revision right in here. So right now we're looking at it in the fiscal reporting workbook, but it would be in your full budget workbook with all 3 years, and you would be doing the red font, bold, underline, all of that to show changes right in your budget. So for example, if this were your budget and you realized, ooh, we now have a name for this person, we have now, a correct salary rate, we would do it right in here. So we would do our red and our bold, we would update the salary, so on and so forth. So there isn't an actual template other than your existing budget workbook. Kathleen has something to add?
Yeah, I just want to note that when we send you these fiscal reporting workbooks, these 2 pages, the budget summary and the detail, are actually going to be locked. We just want to do this to prevent any accidental changes because it will ripple through the rest of the workbook. If you do need to do a budget revision, just let us know and we'd be happy to unlock your workbook for you and send it back so you can make these necessary changes.
Well, it won't be done in their fiscal reporting workbook. It'll be done in their full budget workbook, which was sent to them in the summer once we concluded that proposal development. But back to what Naomi said, if you need a copy of that full budget workbook with all 3 years, we can absolutely get you a copy of that again. Okay, these are great questions. Keep them rolling. So let's see, we looked at budget revisions, we looked at doing projections. So now we are going to just do a quick mention of fiscal desk reviews. So this was mentioned in the welcome webinar that fiscal desk reviews will occur at least once during the contract period or over the 3-year term. Notification will be sent well in advance of the deadline. And in fact, what we did this last time around is we notify you even well before the quarter begins. The quarter in which will be reviewed begins, so that you're prepared, and all throughout the quarter you're saving all of your backup documentation, so that way hopefully at the end of the quarter when you go to report, you do your fiscal reporting as well as your desk review, you have it all together and ready to just package up and deliver to us. So the fiscal desk review really just requires backup documentation for everything that you've not yet provided. You're going to provide time and effort forms. But to also back up that time, we're going to ask for copies of your payroll or accounting system. We would also ask for backup for any other cost categories being reported. So if you have mileage, if you have airfare for going to the CalFresh forum, if you have other costs, let's say you purchase staff t-shirts or some signage for your CalFresh outreach office, so on and so forth, we're going to ask for receipts and proof of purchase. So it is not an official audit, but think of doing an audit. I mean, it's a very similar practice. Really, I just want to reassure you, the reason that we do these fiscal desk reviews is A, yes, we are required to do so by CDSS, but really B, it's to have an opportunity to provide technical assistance and offer support, help clarify questions. We are not looking at it from the lens of ooh, what can we catch? We are looking at it from the lens of where might there be questions, where might there be areas to streamline, and also where might there be some really great best practices that we can share out with everyone. So it's just a nice, helpful tool. We have some example instructions that we will share with you along with all of the other documents, but I'm not going to dive into those. Okay, so some next steps. I love our dancing carrot here. So we've reviewed a lot of documents. We've said we are going to share these templates with you, but what do we want to be your takeaway for today? One thing is, please review your budget and notify your fiscal analyst if you anticipate needing to do a bar prior to Q1 fiscal reporting. As mentioned before, we would like to receive those in December. But of course that hinges on getting a fully executed contract. So we'll continue to revisit the time frame if needed. We will be sharing those time and effort templates with you. We're hoping you can distribute those to all CFO staff, interns, volunteers that are working on your team so that they can start tracking their hours. Also, watch for fiscal reporting reminders. We will definitely be giving you more updates as time goes on. And that first invoice and SSDR, your fiscal reporting, will be due the end of January. Please reach out to us with questions. And as mentioned at the beginning, we will be notifying each of you who your specific assigned fiscal analyst is so they can get to know your entity better and start to develop a working relationship with you and help really dive into your budgets wherever needed. But also, we work very closely as a team. So if at any point you have questions that either your assigned fiscal analyst isn't able to answer at the time, we work together and we are all here to support you. And we're truly a team tackling this together. So please reach out to us. Okay, so that concludes our webinar content for the day. We're happy to help address any other questions you have right now, work through any scenarios. You just let us know. We're looking at the chat box, and feel free to say in there, please unmute my line, and we can do that as well so we can hear you verbally. Chantal, do we have to get a new analyst? Oh, thank you, Chantal. We appreciate the compliments. We enjoy working with you as well. For some of our folks who are existing contractors, so our far north community-based organizations and our ongoing campuses, some of you will be assigned to new fiscal analysts, but only a few of you. For the most part, we tried to keep it consistent just because it's nice once we get to know you and understand your entity. We want to continue working with you. So it'll be minimal. All right, next question. When we bought lunch for the in-person training for CalFresh on campus, where do we charge that? Ooh, this is a great question. Unfortunately, with these funds, we cannot purchase food. So we can get creative with you in helping to identify other areas to charge that, but it will not be allowable on CalFresh Outreach. I do apologize. If that was not clearly discussed with you prior to us coming and facilitating the training with you, I sincerely apologize. We do not want anybody to be paying out of pocket or under false pretenses. So definitely reach out to us and we can help you with that question. Okay, so that's the end of the questions that I'm seeing in the group chat box right now. Naomi or Kathleen, do you have anything to add? And we will continue to leave the lines open. Oh, we did have a
question.
Great.
Yeah, how do I find my school's rep? So we apologize for the delay in getting that email out to you. We thought we were going to be further along in the contract process at this point, so we were anticipating at this point in the year already having a signed master agreement. So a few things have gotten just a little bit delayed because of that. So we will be following up next week with each campus, and you will be getting an email from your assigned program manager, and it will have your fiscal analyst CC'd on that email and identified, so you will get that next week. If you don't get that email, feel free to reach out to us. It's likely because you are not on your contractor information form is why you may not see the email. But if you don't, feel free to reach out to us and we can help guide you at our CHC CalFresh Outreach at chsuchico.edu email address listed right up there on the slide.
So the good news is, in the meantime, Derek, that means you get the whole team. You get all of us. Oh, you're very welcome. So we're going to go ahead and leave that chat box up. We're going to leave the line open for a few more minutes. Take advantage of our time. We're all here with you. And so if we don't get any more questions, we will announce when we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. I'm going to put the line on mute for just a moment, but we are here.
Hello, Robert. So we will be sending a copy of the recorded webinar and the PowerPoint slides in the follow-up email that will be coming out next week with from your assigned program manager as well as your fiscal analyst. So we'll include all of the documents that were discussed during that program reporting webinar last week, as well as the webinar and the slides from this PowerPoint today.